and welcome to this first panel of the 18th birthday edition of the LMA LGBTQ plus Archives and History Conference. I'm Sean, my pronouns are they, them. I'm delighted to be introducing this first panel, not least because of our first guest, who is our guest of honor and is Jan Pimblett. We're also joined by Tom Furber and Topher Campbell. Before we started, because we can't all celebrate together, I thought I'd get a little 18 birthday tiara and just say, happy birthday, LMA conference. I also got a lovely sash, but I can't be bothered to iron it. So hopefully this will do. So I'm going to quickly introduce everyone, and then we've got some questions just to reflect on the last 18 years of the conference. So I personally have been involved with the conference since about 2011, I think. And it seems a long time ago now, and very fondly remember when we did the 10th anniversary do in the Guildhall, which was a very epic and beautiful event. But each one of them since then has been absolutely perfect as well. So first of all, we'll speak to Jan Pimblett. For those of you who've been before, Jan will be a very, very familiar face. Jan is the matriarch of the conference. Jan's pronouns are she, her. She worked for the London Metropolitan Archives for over 18 years on learning, outreach programs, and community engagement. She established the annual LGBTQ plus History and Archives Conference in 2003. As well as establishing the LGBTQ plus History Club, hosting and advising on the International Archives, Libraries, Museums and Special Collections Conference, and developing new collections, including Rukus, and running successful HLF grant bids for projects including Speak Out London and Haringey Vanguard. Most recently, Jan has become a trustee of the National HIV Stories Trust, and she holds an MA in Museums and Galleries in Education. So thanks for joining us, Jan. And then we will hear from Topher Campbell. Topher's pronouns are he, him. He is a filmmaker, theatre maker, and writer. Topher's work focuses on sexuality, masculinity, race, human rights, memoir, and climate change. He's a former artistic director of the Red Room Theatre Company. In 2000, he co-founded Rukus Federation, a Black queer arts charity with photographer Ajamu X. The Rukus collection is held in the London Metropolitan Archives. Topher is also a Fellow of the Royal Society of Arts. In 2017, Topher was awarded an honorary doctorate by the University of Sussex for his work in the arts and Black LGBTQ advocacy. It's the first honorary doctorate to be given to an openly Black gay man in the UK. So lovely to have you here, Toph. And last but absolutely not least is Tom Furber. Tom's pronouns are he, him, and Tom is the Engagement and Learning Officer at London Metropolitan Archives. Tom's remit is in formal adult education and community projects, and as part of this wider scheme of work, he's worked on programmes and projects that cultivate and share LGBTQ plus perspectives on archives and histories. These include the award-winning Speak Out London Diversity City, the ARMS Conference, and Out Loud London Metropolitan LGBTQ plus Archives. He supports and regularly hosts London Metropolitan Archives' monthly LGBTQ History Club. So it's wonderful to have you all here. Thank you. And also just wanted to mention there are lots of people that we could have had here celebrating with us who've been really important stakeholders and members of this wonderful community that we've built up over 18 years, including Claire Summerskill, Jamu X, Veronica Mackenzie from Haringey Vanguard. The list goes on and on and on. So thank you to everyone who's been involved in any capacity over the last 18 years, and welcome to all of the newcomers as well. So first of all, I would like to ask our guest of honor to set the scene by reflecting 18 years back, or maybe before, just to explain the way Jan's own story with LMA and also the way that the LGBTQ plus conference came about, and maybe share an anecdote or two.
Well, not sure about that, but yeah, I mean, the way it sort of started, I hadn't been at LMA very long, and the then head of service, Deborah Jenkins, called me into her office, and I thought, oh, what's going to happen? And she talked to me for 5 minutes. And what she said was, London Metropolitan Archives is meant to represent the lives and experiences of all Londoners. And the gap in our collections is around LGBTQ plus people. And we're losing those stories because a generation is slipping away. What are you going to do about it, Jan? Do what you like. That was the conversation. So I started off with the idea, well, let's get people into a room. Let's see what we can do for I suppose it started off as a conference idea, but it was really sort of just getting people in for a conversation to start with. And we were pretty overwhelmed by how many people wanted to come. And we squeezed so many people into a very small room. I think it's probably not legal, but anyway, there's an anecdote for you. And when we first started, of course, we didn't use the archive on a closed. It was an open Saturday. The whole idea was that this was an event that was embedded in the regular life of the archive. So the archive is open. So at one end of the reading room, there were people looking at things to do with drains, and at the other end of the room, sealed off just by some screens with some interesting pictures on, was the members of the group that had come into the conference thing, having coffee and talking loudly about what they'd been experiencing in the room next door. So it was a real old mashup, but it was exciting. It was really interesting. And what that told me right from the get-go was there was a need and a demand for that experience. And so many people just wanted to engage. And it was like we kicked the door open and people felt confident about coming in. And the people that came on that day, it was a wonderful mixture as well. So there were new faces in the room, but some of our regular readers who were normally reading about drains came to the conference. And that's really how it started. Is that enough?
It is, yeah. What do you think how do you think the institution itself kind of responded to those early conferences?
It was hugely positive. Senior staff came along and supported and actually did some tech stuff right at the beginning. There was a lot of excitement, and there was a clear understanding that actually it wasn't just a one-off enclosed event. What it was meant to generate, which is what we built over time, were those regular events that were part of the regular life of the archive, but also encouraging people to get to grips with the really important message that their history, our history, is important, and to collect it and share it is absolutely radical in terms of an action you can take. So, and I've said that, I know people have heard me say this before, but LMA's collections are quite formal, so you'll get a lot of medical, legal stuff, and it's people writing about the community. And part of the drive of this was to, again, open up opportunities through building new collections and people responding to that material. So they were speaking with an authentic voice and providing a counterpoint to those official views. So, yeah, it started to sort of open it out. And I think if I'm going to do that mists of times, that was 2003. By 2018 or thereabouts, you know, when you have the head of service, Jeff Pick, standing in the room and saying, when you are here, LMA is a queer space. This is your space, and giving ownership. I think that tells you the journey that's been taken over that period of time.
Absolutely. And I think it shows the power of sustained and meaningful engagement with the community because of the way that there's been such a huge cultural shift within the LMA. So thank you very much, Jan, which nicely leads us on to a cultural shift in the form of Rukus. So Rukus is one of many collections that have been kind of adopted by LMA. And Topher, I wondered if you would like to just speak about the kind of the genesis of that, but also the relationship that you had as quite a grassroots organisation with an institution that was kind of internationally recognised, like the London Metropolitan Archives.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot. The Rukus archive, it was never an archive. It was really a conversation between two artists, myself and Jan, Jan Pimblett. We've known each other since the 90s. And when we created what we decided to call Rukus Federation in the year 2000, it was because we, as artists, as young men, we were very frustrated with the kind of several things that there was a kind of a victim narrative around black people, black queer people particularly, and also we were very kind of frustrated that there wasn't a space for play and for fun, and but also John and I were very much in the black queer communities in the UK and the US, and so very much heavily influenced by, you know, representation around creative and artistic stories, me being film, John being in stills photography. And we kind of wanted to do an exhibition. So we tried to do this exhibition, which we tried to get off the ground. And back in the early 2000s, nobody in the black queer community thought that what they had was of any value. But we collected this stuff, put it together, trying to be as brief as possible here. And because there's lots of, you know, fits and starts and lots of lots of kind of people who didn't understand what we're doing. But eventually we got an exhibition together, and then we had all this stuff. And we didn't know where to put it, and we spoke to various people, and Jan was at this time kind of creating a relationship with the LMA, including people like Jan and Richard Wilshire, and kind of put it to me that we should then come to the London Metropolitan Archives. And now I'm not an archivist, and I was never an archivist, and I have no notion of what archive meant in any professional sense. So the whole kind of idea of this massive building in Clerkenwell that had all these archives in it was like a whole revelation to me, and it was kind of an exciting revelation. And what the offer was from Jan, it was amazing, that if you just give us a little bit of money, and it wasn't really that much money, it's like 500 quid, we will look after your archive for you. And we worked together, and Jan was kind of leading the kind of relationship to kind of make Rukus Archive something that becomes part of their collection, you know, looked after by the LMA, but professionally done through volunteers as well. And it was just a beautiful thing, really, over a period of like 2 or 3 years. That, you know, we had these amazing volunteers, some of who were, you know, really important and interesting creatives, artists, academics out in the community and also globally, who came and helped out to make this archive work. And somehow, it's just through Jan and through Richard, it just kind of, the interest grew, and Jan as well, of course. The interest grew around this archive, and we call it the Rukus Archive, not the Rukus LGBTQ Archive, because part of that was about the artistic project. It was a project that was around, you know, kind of creating a space creatively and artistically that kind of showed the lives of Black LGBTQ people in the UK. And yeah, and it's become world famous. I love it. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like it's a real testament as well to the roles that institutions can play in using those professional skills that you say that you didn't have as archivists or as curators or, you know, whatever it is, to work with the actual communities who are generating the kind of the stuff, and that those two relationships can work really well together. And then, of course, at the 10th anniversary conference, Ajamu's work was exhibited at the Guildhall as part of that celebration, which felt like a really huge and beautiful moment as well.
Yeah, there was what I still liked about the LMA. Again, it was a very different kind of relationship than you just come and put this stuff here and then we'll forget about it. It was like it has always been a partnership, and even now I'm still talking to LMA with the next generation of archive managers there about something that we're doing, perhaps in terms of reviving an exhibition from 2004 at the Horse Hospital. And so I feel that kind of creative, energizing kind of relationship is something that's made it really possible. And Jan has been very motoring in terms of that conversation. That's why, and proposing lots of ways in which the archive can remain a living archive. And the Guildhall project was part of that. You know, that he was doing this project, which was taking portraits of Fierce. It was taking portraits of young Black LGBTQ people in the UK, and it became something that was collaborative, and that then itself becomes part of the archive. So it's kind of an exciting thing, and I'm hoping, and it's been both ways. I hope, you know, there's been a conversation that's happened both ways in terms of, you know, what is an archive and how does an archive work, and what ways in which an archive can evolve and help an institution evolve. So it's been a two-way thing, I think.
Excellent, thank you so much. And then thinking about these, so we have collections, but what's being done with them? How are they being used rather than just kind of sitting in a room somewhere? Which leads us nicely on to Tom. So Tom, I wonder if you could talk about kind of what's happened since this conference started. These great collections are being built and continuing to grow. What are they used for? What kind of conversations come out of them?
John, so I think the big change to me is perhaps what's been happening outside the LMA as much as what's been happening inside the LMA. So I think it's fair to say that LMA was on the front, on the leading edge of thinking about the things we've been talking about, thinking about community engagement, kind of proactively addressing gaps in collections, knowing what we bring to the party in terms of providing access and care, but knowing what we can't bring to the party, or having people point out what we don't know. I think the world around us is more like that. With the anniversary celebration and the 50th anniversary of the Wolfenden thing a few years ago, I think that showed how things have changed. You think about what's going on at Tate, think about what's going on. The sector has changed and people want to hear these things. So how as LMA do we stay on that front line? How do we keep these things moving forward? And ultimately that's probably by stepping back. That's by stepping back a little bit as an institution and knowing what we have, which is space. So we have space to bring new people in and to allow those conversations to happen. When Jeff Pick said we're a queer space, to me that's what we do. It's how do we step back and allow conversations to take place in our building, around our building? How do we facilitate things? And with that in mind, we've had a bit of a refresh and rebrand, so I'm very happy to sort of announce the launch of what we're calling Out Loud, the London Metropolitan LGBTQ plus archives. And the idea about that is this is a space where we provide assistance institution, but really it's a platform for our friends to stay with us, but new people to be welcomed into that circle. And we think about how we can continue those conversations about looking at archives in new ways, addressing gaps, addressing silences, re-examining things, and allowing those conversations to kind of flourish and continue to multiply.
Excellent. And did you want to say a little something about the Speak Out project as well, which was such a key moment?
Of course, yeah. So that's right. So the out loud in that name, it's obviously an allusion to Speak Out as well. So the idea about with Speak Out London Diversity City was building on those themes that Jan mentioned. That we're a sort of a local authority archive. We tell the story of London and Londoners, but some stories, some archives more readily wind up in an archive than others, and those sort of institutions that more likely to end up in a place like London Metropolitan Archives are those places that continue those narratives around criminality, around medicalisation, around kind of moral judgment. You know, hospitals, courts, church bodies, their records tend to follow a fairly steady process in a place like LMA, but community groups, individuals, nightclubs, charities, those sorts of things, which allow LGBTQ plus people to speak in their own voice, less so. So you end up having history of LGBTQ plus people less being history by those, these people, and more about those people. We lose the first person and it's the third person. That's the case in lots of parts of history, but it's especially concerning when those third person conversations, those third person narratives are so judgmental and marginalizing in nature. So Speak Out, the idea behind that was to find ways to create both a community archive that can actually stand on its own terms and be its own thing, not necessarily in reference to those narratives, but where necessary, and it is necessary, challenge those narratives as well. And that was done by proactively collecting all histories, by proactively collecting ephemera, things like that, which might not sound so radical to the uninitiated, but there is a traditionalist streak in the world of archives for good reason. But they can tend against those things. These kind of bureaucratic constraints can mean it's harder than you might think to collect oral history. It's harder than you might think to collect ephemera, so flyers, tickets, all those sorts of things. So things actually the Rukus archive really collects so well. those things, they come together in such a coherent form as Rukus presented with, can get a bit lost. So by focusing on and collecting those things, it builds this it tells the other side of the story, which is very important as well. And we mentioned award-winning. I'm very proud to say the award we won was a volunteer award. So actually it's saying, as archivists, we can do this repeating myself back. I don't think you can say it too much. We're an archive, we know this much, and we do those things and we aspire to them very well, but there's gaps in our knowledge. We don't know actually the best thing to title these records. We don't know the best catalogues term to use. We don't necessarily know what these things mean. We don't know what's important, but you do, so tell us. And if we're doing things wrong, tell us. And if we're still doing it wrong, tell us again. Yeah.
Thank you. So in the interest of telling stories and in the interest of time, can we just have a quick fire round here of our favourite memories of this 18-year span of the London Metropolitan Archives? I will begin. Jan and I were in Amsterdam as part of the Arms Conference in 2012. And one evening we spent a very long time in the oldest lesbian bar in Amsterdam drinking Jaeger bombs, which is a very wonderful memory that I will never forget. Jan, do you have any anecdotes from the last 18 years?
I can't remember because there's so many Jaeger bombs, you see. I suppose, there are so many, but some of the most memorable moments, one of them was at the Guildhall and also at LMA. So Pink singers standing up, doing a big chorus at LMA, but the London Gay Symphonic Winds playing in Guildhall Art Gallery with a Jarmu's exhibition downstairs, having moved out of a fantastic conference space. We felt so posh. It was posh, but it was really, really affirming. Yeah. So those sorts of moments, definitely.
Topher?
I guess it was. I don't have any memories of the conferences, but I do have I guess it's more like a touching memory, really. I think the very first time that Richard came to where the archive, where the boxes were, basically at Jarmu's house. I mean, I had stuff at mine, and we all kind of collected it at Jarmu's, and we just had these boxes, these like Perspex boxes, I think it was, and I think there was something really moving about going from these kind of like Perspex boxes. Like, we thought we were kind of together because we thought that John had this like big black book and he would write everything down and he'd catalogue everything. He was very, very, very precise, and I was slightly more kind of like vague. I knew that we had stuff over there and stuff over there, and there's something about the translation of that kind of what we thought was kind of like together kind of collection to several years later seeing these really beautifully presented boxes with these highly categorized sort of, I was just really moved by that because it kind of did the very thing that we were wanting to do in an inarticulate way years before, which was to forever embed the history and part of our culture in the Black British story. And so one of the things that Jan and I used to say, we will never be denied, we will never be denied. And so it was kind of a moving thing, that process, and I still feel kind of moved by it now. So that was something I remember.
Yeah, thank you. And Tom?
Yes, I think mine's maybe as much a feeling as it is a memory, which is about 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon in most conferences. There's a point where you just feel that it's settled in. We have this big row of tables with different stool holders, and there's a big room with a glass-fronted room. There's someone speaking, the audience is there, and everything's just working, and the energy's right. And we've done all this work in the months to come. We've kind of pushed this boulder up the hill. We've got everything working, everything settled. And actually, at this point, it's sort of not ours anymore. We've pushed it off, and it's just going, and it's working, and it's running. And that's kind of an energy that just keeps on building, and it's just kind of out there and loose and working. That's probably my moment, or series of moments, all kind of merged into one.
Okay, final question. And again, this is very quick fire. What is your wish for the future of the LMA and its LGBTQ collections and work? So just one wish. I'll be the fairy godmother who will try to grant it to you. Jan, any wishes? Well,
I'm just thrilled that it's going forward. I'm not there anymore, but that's actually what I was hoping for anyway, that it's not about me as an individual or any of us as individuals. The institution is there, it's running, and therefore it will respond and flex and change and invite people in and all those things. So I think what I'm seeing from outside here in retirement land, it's really, really exciting. I'm thrilled.
Yes, and we're thrilled to have you here as well. I can't say how much.
Yes, I don't go out much.
You've not gone out today, I'm afraid, Jan. You still,
Haven't I?
yeah. You're still at home. You're still at home. There's a pandemic, dear. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any wishes?
Oh, just this accessibility continues, and we get a situation where you can. I like to see, because lots of people, so in terms of our relationship with the archive, ask us how do we get hold of it, and at the moment, quite rightly, we have to have people go down and see it. But I like to see a way that we start going virtual and digital, so we kind of find a way of kind of being able to go into the archives even if we can't physically be there, and be engaging with it, and globally as well, because in terms of the Black and Brown diaspora, kind of getting hold of something like the Rukus archive is different. So I'd like to be able to see virtuality and augmented reality kind of come into the archives so we can go and forage around for ourselves.
Yeah, amazing. Tom, are you up for the challenge?
I'm going to be unoriginal because I think my wish is very similar to Jan's, that I want to be made redundant on these particular set of programs. I hasten to
redundant.
Don't be careful what you wish for, because I
caveated that. You heard me. So my wishes are basically I can just ever more fade into the background on these things. That we just get new people, kind of young, old, everything in between, just coming in and just taking it over. And all I need to do is say, this is where you send your invoice, I'll book you a room, and I'll do the Eventbrite for you. Off you go.
Yeah. Amazing. And on that note, perhaps we should hand it over to everybody else. So we will be available for some questions in the future. But for now, oh no.
We'll take that in post, don't worry.
Pardon?
We'll take that in post, don't worry. We're not going to fine.
Okay, so ask us questions, any comments you might have, or if you have any anecdotes or stories to tell from the last 18 years, then get asking, and we'll do our best to respond.
Take care. Bye.